Hyper literally can't stay. It's locked on this other big thing with Kevin Costner, and Kevin needs Hyper, and so it can't stay.
Thanks for joining us for another customer spotlight. If you don't know me, I'm Zach from MotoCrane, and today we have a very special guest. This is Mr. Jordan Overman from Override Films, who has been a very early supporter of MotoCrane. As far as I know, is our only customer that has owned every single one of our remote arms ever. Jordan, why don't you start just by introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about the work that Override does.
I own Override, my wife and I run it together, and we are a specialty camera movement company. Drone was where we really got our start when we started the company back in 2011. We've expanded that to offer arm car stuff, and we do gimbal work and cinema robot, as well as techno-crane stuff. And the majority of all that work within those different tools and services that we offer, most of that is drone and arm car. And usually those are working together, particularly on car commercials and car campaigns. So yeah, we're Utah-based, but maybe 50% of our work is in Utah, and the rest is elsewhere. We do a lot of work in LA, been able to work in all 50 states now, and then we've shot in over 20 countries. And
wow.
So
you were around in what I would refer to as the wild, wild west of aerial cinematography before it was even drones. Tell me about the early days of dealing with hacking together your own flying gadget and putting like the first RED cameras on there. And people don't realize, like, there was a small group of pioneers that were like at the forefront of figuring it out before FAA regs like caught up with anything.
yeah, it's this balance of like super fun and terrifying, like all at the same time. Like every job you're on, you're just like, please just stay in the air.
Because there was no like turnkey, like, oh, I'm just gonna go on B&H and buy an Inspire 2 and just gonna throw some batteries in to make it work. Like,
we're taking these RC helicopters, we're using this mixed bag of metal with a servo gimbal with literally pool foam noodles.
yeah. These were not craft that were designed to carry cameras.
No.
These were like literal hobbyists.
Oh yeah, they're like
remote control helis.
totally. And so the guy that I teamed up with, who was really like spearheading building these, what we now call drones, but like you said, they weren't drones at the time. He was this 3D RC heli hobbyist. And so 3D is in like, he's doing the acrobatic stuff. So he's, you know, it's flipping up, it's insane. It's kind
He was a pilot.
He was a pilot, and this is before FPV, so it's similar to the world of FPV, where you take an FPV pilot and you're like, okay, you race FPV drones, let's put you in the cinema space, and we need to pivot a little bit the way that you fly, so that it, exactly. So it's kind of similar, and so when we did our first flights with this guy, he was so bored. Because it's like, okay, we're going over these trees and we're revealing this, whatever, the Grand Canyon, because back then we flew at tons of national parks all the time.
Yeah.
With the park rangers.
Which is now
Very illegal. Yeah, don't fly. I mean, if it's a DJI drone, it won't let you fly at the national park. But back then, there was no FAA regulation, and so the park rangers, like, we're doing a tourism thing on whatever, the Grand Canyon or different Zion National Park in Utah, and we've got the park rangers there with us. They're like, that is so cool. Wow, like, look at that thing fly. And they're big, you know, they're like these big, because yeah, we're carrying REDs. I don't know if we were the first, we were definitely one of the first to be flying a RED. Terrifying, you know. It was crazy just because all this is just garage built stuff, you know, just figuring it out. It was a perspective that wasn't seen before, because there was stuff that you shoot on the ground, stuff that you shoot on cranes, and then helicopters.
Yep.
And there wasn't this in-between of close proximity. I loved it because there were shots all the time that we were getting that's like, I've never seen that before. And that was, I think, you know, and what I still love is when you can find those opportunities to get these shots of like, wow, I've never seen something like that before. And like, that's super satisfying to be a part of that. So that was really fun in the early drone days.
Yeah. So similarly, like because you were one of the very early adopters of, you know, our technology of, universal remote arms. If we rewind 4 or 5 years ago, there were not very many people in space. How was that for you, like bringing an arm car into a place that had never had one based there?
It was a similar path to what we did in the drone space. There were people who were doing arm car work, from LA and from these other major cities that were and are incredible, like masters of their craft, like, basically built what is the arm car. But there was this major gap between the veterans and
the new generation.
Yeah, exactly, this new generation of filmmakers. And then how can we, again, get those shots that we haven't seen before? It was fun for us to dive into that again, just see like, all right, what can we do now with this tool that we couldn't do with drones and gimbals, and how can we use this to get shots we've never seen before? And that's kind of just fueled our excitement with getting into this, is just how can we use this tool in a different way.
You have 5 arm car options, if I can count correctly.
Yeah.
Cayenne, Raptor, Can-Am.
Can-Am, rest in peace.
Yeah. Started with a Mini Cooper.
We started with the Mini, a Razor. It's gone on our Can-Am, the Cayenne, 2 different Ford Raptors. We're doing a new truck build right now. So just being able to like try all these different vehicles and put arms on them.
Everyone always asks her, like, why is it always on Porsche Cayenne turbos? And it's like, they're just great. They're just great platforms. They're fast, massive brakes, seating capacity, they're comfortable.
And like stock, they're so great, so smooth. And so the Cayenne, probably as far as being like the most well-rounded vehicle, I think the Cayenne probably takes that, because it's just got so much power, makes it so great, whether we're doing something on track or off-road. And so I feel like probably more often than not in the Cayenne, you're just like, oh, this is amazing.
What MotoCrane arm is your favorite?
I mean, Hyper and Radical are for sure the 2 workhorses. Hyper works the most. Radical's maybe the most fun though. We get rowdy with Hyper for sure, but maybe because of Radical's size, that you just feel like you can just really beat that thing up, just whip it around. And maybe because of the platforms too, when we're using Radical. I guess it's sometimes on Cayenne. Where we primarily use it is on Cayenne and on Can-Am. So when we're on a Can-Am job with Radical, it's usually the reason we're on the Can-Am is because we're doing some like insane terrain or really tight quartered stuff that the Raptor or the Cayenne don't fit in.
You guys shot the F-150, the Raptor R. On Can-Am and Radical.
Yeah, on the Raptor R launch film, it was supposed to be Hyper on the Raptor. We were scouting locations and we were like, oh, these trails, like the Raptor won't fit. It's too wide. And so we had to switch over to Can-Am with Radical, and Raptor became a mobile light. So we had to like reconfigure the whole build because, Hyper and Raptor's payloads are very different. It was, this last minute switchover. But yeah, that was a fun campaign because it was we were just rallying. And so I would say Radical's probably the most fun because you are typically using Radical because you're on terrain that you are just going hard.
What was like the hardest that you pushed the system?
It was actually on that shoot where we had to pull Hyper off because that one head wasn't working. We actually switched to Radical because Hyper had to go to another job that was already committed to. But the camera build couldn't change. We had to run XL, we had to run Venice, a large zoom lens with stills camera on there. And so when we were like, Hyper literally can't stay. It's locked on this big thing with Kevin Costner, and like it has to go to Kevin needs Hyper, and so it can't stay. So yeah, having to switch to Radical, we were like, man, can it handle what we need it to do? And it's off-road, super rugged, and it did. It like just totally crushed it. Like, a lot of just insane terrain. And yeah, I mean, do you want me to tell you what the payload was?
Yeah, we want to know, what is the payload? What did you run?
So I think on that job, the payload we had at about 65 pounds. It was actually maybe a little over 65. 65 pounds off-road. And really hard terrain, really close proximity with one of the best picture car drivers out there. It's just really insane, and Radical just crushed it.
The tools always break. There's always a point where something is going to not function as intended, or you exceed the limit of something and it responds as it's known to. Tell me about a time that you've experienced that with MotoCrane and how we responded as a team for you guys.
Yeah, there was one back in, I think it was 2018, yeah, when we had Classic, and we were on one of our first jobs with Classic. We were out in San Francisco doing a multi-day shoot. We arrived, we started prepping and building the setup. The arm, just for whatever reason, in transit, it stopped working. So we couldn't get the arm to move at all. I remember we called you up, we're like, Zach, we're shooting tomorrow and for the next like 5 days out here in San Francisco, and our arm won't move. And so you bought a plane ticket, you're like, I'll be right there. I don't even know how they let you on the airplane, but you had like all this stuff between the base and an arm, and
Paid out every Delta employee that I saw. Yeah, don't ask questions.
these cases of like cables and other parts and things, and we went through stuff, and yeah, I think it turned out just being a cable that we had to swap out. And you're like, well, I guess I'll take all this back with me. But you gave us the new set of cables, and we were back up and running, and it was all great. So that was, so that was just awesome, and just so telling to like, how you guys handle when stuff breaks, because things break. And yeah, so that was just, awesome of you guys to step up and solve that for us.
Yeah. What would you say to that person that's trying to elevate their work, take the next step, whatever it might be, where they are sort of in their beginner stages?
Don't have the grass is greener mentality of like, well, once I get this piece of equipment, or once I get that client, then I'll be a filmmaker, then I'll be more legit. So like, find your sweet spot, that intersection of like whatever you're really good at and what you really like wherever those 2 points meet, like just live in that space. Put in the time and the work and the sweat to be the one and only in that thing, and work with what you've got.
You need to understand that you're talking about starting really a dance team, and people need to be in cadence and know their roles and know their moves and have timing. And if you don't have those people, the tool is going to collect dust.
One, there has to be a level of competency with that tool, where you're not just going to get an arm and be able to swing it around and like, oh yeah, I'll be able to get great stuff. It's like, or any other camera tool, you have to put in the time to like know that and know how you can use it and use it safely. And
controversial question, drone or arm car?
Arm car is definitely more fun. I mean, there's just something, it's cool when you're working, but like everybody in the car is like, did you just see that? Like, that was the stoke level. And we've been so lucky that on set, it's cool when people gather around, when people are like, you gotta come see this shot, whether it's for drone or whether it's for arm car, and both kind of get the same reaction of when people watch it, they're just like, oh, that was amazing. And they're like, that was so close. But between drone or arm car, I don't know if I could pick. It's arm car when you're like in it and you're like getting some really dynamic stuff, when all the drivers are just really in sync. That's probably more satisfying, I think, because there's a lot more orchestration happening with all the pieces. There's 4 or 5 people in the arm car that are all working together, and then there's your picture car driver or drivers. So when that like symphony is like really working well, it's like, that's super satisfying. Drone has the same thing, with maybe a little more limitless capacity with what drone, whether it's FPV or whatever, what that can do. But there's definitely, so maybe arm car's got a bit of a lead, but they both have their own.
I think your summary was really good.
With my politically safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we won't throw you out. Yeah, we won't throw you out through the front
Yeah,
door.
exactly.
And thank you for being with us today. It's always great to see you and hear about all the cool projects you're working on, and learn what's coming next for Override Film. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys for watching. This is a new series that we're doing featuring great customers that we have all over the world, to learn more about how they got to where they are today, and what makes them and their career paths unique. So if you want to see someone featured that has an awesome backstory, make sure you like or comment below in this video telling us who should be next in the series. So thanks for watching.